we need to talk about this more, or at least strengthen the conversation around how we can protect artists working in the music industry. True, there are joyful and beautiful moments being a musician, but there are also some dark and challenging times too. That's why we have Rachel Jepson, a singer and a BACP accredited psychotherapist who runs counselling for musicians, joining us this week. Rachel is here to discuss some of the challenges that musicians are facing, as well as what sort of things are contributing to that, as well as giving voice to the type of things we can put in place to protect our artists. Rachel Jepson, if someone had asked you when you were a kid, what do you want to be or do when you're older? What do you think your answer would have been?
I would have probably said an actress because I wanted to be in films and all of that kind of stuff. I was singing then, but I don't know if that would have entered my mind as a career at that point, which is interesting.
So, how did you then go into the music industry, which you spent 25 years in?
Yeah, probably longer than that now. Like, it's just crazy. I applied for university. I wanted to be a journalist. So I'd got into, I think, probably Sheffield, Liverpool, those kinds of things, because I wanted to do sort of media studies degrees and that kind of thing. So I could then go on and do journalism and things. So I applied for that. And then there was so I went to a school where there was a big band in the sixth form. And there was a singer with the big band, and I always wanted to be the singer with the big band. But when I asked the leader, who was also the head of music, if I could have a go, he said, "No, we've already got somebody. We don't need you." And it just kept brushing me off. And then one day she got nodules, she got vocal nodules, and I got the opportunity to do it. He came over to me and said, "She's not going to be in for a bit. Do you want to come and try out?" Don't think he had high hopes. It just because no one had really heard me sing before at that point. And then the rest is history. I went and sang, and everyone was amazed and loved it. And I was the singer of the big band. And then the National Youth Jazz Orchestra came and did a workshop with us. And they said, "You need to come to London and do this with us." So I did. I moved to London, didn't go to university, didn't do media, didn't do any of the things. I had a very supportive mum who was just like, "Go and do what you want to do. There's plenty of time for other things, but right now, this is what you want to do." And she was lovely. And yeah, so I went to London, did lots of session stuff, and that's it really. So yeah, I often think of what would have happened if I had gone to university and done journalism. I don't know, but I'm glad that I did what I did and went down that path.
And as well as that career in music, you have now 8 years' experience as a BACP accredited psychotherapist. So,
Yeah.
what struggles did you experience as you worked in the music industry, and how did that then fuel your desire to help others in those positions?
That's an excellent question. I think it's different depending on where I am in my career when I look back. So when I first started out, I don't feel like I was prepared at all for dealing with quite basic and obvious things that everybody knows happens in the arts, which is rejection. You're not prepared for that in a music course or any of the, any music education. And people don't really talk about it massively about how they manage that. So I didn't really feel I had the tools to manage rejection, um, and just the constant trying. And of course, sometimes you would have successes, and that was great. And it would keep you going for a bit. I mean, the same is true now, and the same is probably true for lots of other careers. I think specifically with music, there is such a huge aspect of rejection and going for things, being told even that you are going to get something or you are good enough to do something, and then not doing that thing and not and that feeds into a massive kind of hole of, am I good enough? Am I worth it? Is this what I should be doing? Did I make a mistake? All of those things. And I know that I wasn't alone in that now, But back then, nobody really talked about it. So I was feeling very, very anxious and worried. And, am I doing the right things? I think as well, being a woman in music, there was an aspect of harassment as well, feeling like I needed to be a certain way, act a certain way, say yes to things a lot, because if I didn't, someone else would be asked. So there was a lot of sort of inappropriate behavior from maybe people in power. When I look back on that now, I think, gosh, I wish that I had been able to say, that's not right. I don't want you doing that. But there was a massive fear again of, if I do this or if I say anything or whistle blow, will I then be asked to come back? And there is a huge fear because it's such a competitive industry. So you don't want to do anything that's going to hinder your chances of doing well in that. So there was all of that going on, which I found really troublesome. And there was also just the aspect of kind of being noticed, for what you're doing. Again, there wasn't really social media when I was starting out. That's been a very recent thing in my career. So it was, do I record this CD and send it off to record labels and hope that they're going to notice me? Or do I constantly gig, constantly ask people to come via email? People who I maybe have heard of, or even journalists and things. I was emailing, the NME and things and asking them to come to gigs. And they probably never looked at those emails, got these, but that was the kind of thing that was going on. I don't feel, again, that was really talked about. So I was just kind of feeling around, and if something worked, then I'd keep doing it. And if something didn't work, then I'd get really upset and be like, why am I doing this? What am I doing here? So there was just constant comparison as well, which I think is so much worse now. Again, with social media, the constant comparison of, oh, they've got that opportunity, but I'm very similar to them, or my voice is very similar, or what do I need to do to get noticed? Or having that on the other end, being successful, having opportunities, and then friends going, well, I'm here and I'm doing really well and I've got a great voice. And why are you getting the? So there's just all of that to navigate. And as I've kind of got more experienced in music, there definitely has been as a parent, how do you navigate that? How do you go and do gigs when you've got children at home? Is it okay for me to be doing that? Do I need to feel guilty about doing that? If my child is ill, then obviously I can't leave to go to a gig. But then again, they might not ask me again. And there are other people relying on you, other people in the band, whatever it is that you're doing, who have also booked that time. And then there's the venue who you feel you're letting down. So there's a lot to navigate, Alexa, around those things. But yeah, when I was studying to be a counsellor and I was doing my placement, so yeah, 8 years ago or so, I started to think, when have I struggled in my life? And I have struggled on and off with various things for the whole of my life, depression, anxiety. But I started to think, is this because of the music industry? And if so, what are some of the things that I've experienced in that? And what would I have needed to help me? And I'm definitely not blaming all of my mental health struggles on the music industry at all. But I think, again, if I felt like I was prepared, some of those things might have been managed better. And it was all to do with how I managed things. So I started looking at provisions while I was studying for mental health in the music industry. And at the time, so yeah, like 8 years ago or so, there was only really help musicians and music support that had counselling provision for people in the music industry. So I would meet up with these charities and talk to them about all my ideas and things like that. And then I thought, actually, when I'm qualified, why don't I start up a service? And so I have done that, and I did work with Help Musician. I do stuff with music support and, all of those things. But there is so much more now. There is so much more provision now. It's actually really amazing. So yeah, hope that answers the question. That's some of the experiences I've had with mental health and why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah. What are some of the prevalent struggles that musicians are describing in this current climate? And what are the symptoms that we may be able to recognize as singing teachers to help point the people we're working with in the right direction?
That's a really great question as well. So I'm doing a PhD at the moment. I've been doing a lot of research, I've been interviewing and doing focus groups. So alongside my work in the music industry, just working with clients who are coming to me with issues. And obviously I have friends and family who work in music, and I myself, along with all of that, again, the things that have really come out where every single participant has said that it's a struggle for them has been social media. That has been a huge thing. 100% of people have said that social media is a massive thing. Now, when it comes to clients and people coming to me wanting to discuss things, social media isn't like, right, I need to talk about social media because this is, it's sort of alongside a lot of things. So they will be very concerned about getting enough likes and getting enough views. If they put a new video out of them playing, they want to hit, 2,000 views within the hour or something like that. And obviously that doesn't always happen. And as I was saying before, around sort of rejection and things like that, I guess it's the equivalent to what I used to experience and the people I was sort of in the industry with early on would experience around comparison and am I getting picked for this thing? But it's just so immediate now. So you basically post something and you can see who likes you, or who's watched it. You can even see comments that people have made. So that's a really big thing that people have said contribute to poor mental health in music. It's a really difficult thing to manage, other than going, right, why don't you just come off social media? It's a very hard thing to manage. I think if you knew somebody or you had students that were coming to you and talking about that, I think that's definitely something important for them to look at. What is it that you want from these views and likes? Are the views and likes for validation, which we all need sometimes? Are they for opportunities? Do you feel that if you get enough likes, you will then be chosen to play at this place or audition for this, whatever it is? And is there another way that you can do that? Have you looked at maybe doing this? Or obviously, as a therapist, I can't give advice, but I can explore those things with clients. But you as a singing teacher and even friends and in the music industry, if they come to you with those things, that is definitely something to look at. And I should imagine that most people, I definitely have that. If I put something on social media, has anyone looked at this and what have they said? And so there's definitely that. And it's such a common thing that everybody can share and, it resonates with everybody. I think addiction is a really big thing. And I think if you ask the general public when they thought of mental health in music, what they thought of, I think a lot of people would think of addiction. I would probably think of specific artists that came to mind when they thought of that. I think from, again, doing research that I've been doing and just talking to people, it's becoming a little bit easier. There is a little bit more support for people. It's not as stigmatized if somebody decides that they don't want to drink at a gig or they don't want to take drugs or whatever is going on. There's just a little bit more acceptance than there used to be. And I think that comes down to people talking about it more. But also there's a lot of like non-alcoholic drinks now that are really good. And when venues ask people what their riders are and what they want, it used to be you'd have bottles of champagne, beer, and actually now people are going, oh, can I have some 0% Stella or whatever it is? And actually there's not as much of a stigma around that. So there's some really good things going on with that. But I think, again, and it's a really difficult thing to navigate. I think if somebody comes to you or is discussing that with you and thinks they may have a problem, there are so many services that are available, and music support especially kind of specialize in addiction. So I know that they work with people, and obviously they've got therapy, they've got the helpline, but then they do a lot of referrals to rehab centers and things like that. So there is provision, and there is really good provision for that kind of thing. And even, just encouraging people to have a non-alcoholic beer if they don't really need to have that drink. There is just such an expectation for people to drink, and especially when you're networking. If you've just been doing a gig, you've just been singing it with your band or whatever, when you come off stage, there are people there who want to talk to you. And those people might be able to offer you an opportunity or might be really interested in working with you in some way. and they expect you to come and sit with them and have a chat. And drink does inevitably come into that at some point. So again, it's just people navigating that and maybe not having that expectation. And that comes down to systemic stuff, to how people think of the industry, lots of things that we have to slowly undo, which is going to be really difficult. But again, these are things that people do struggle with. And it's kind of accepted, especially in our country, that we just have a drink of an evening because we've had a hard day or whatever it is. So that is something that people could come to you with and to other singing teachers with. And I'll say drinking isn't great for the vocals. So there is that to bear in mind as well. The inconsistency of work is a massive one. So, it's not an industry to enter into lightly. I think again, there is a expectation from the general public and maybe a view even from the government that the arts is not really a viable career and isn't something to be taken seriously. And they're showing that with pulling funding from music in schools and things like that, and showing that maths, English, science are more important, which of course they are very important. But that just shows parents and other people that actually, yeah, music isn't that important. And why are you doing that? Why do you want to do that? You enter into the music industry because you love music and you want to make a living out of it. But there are obviously realities to that. And one of them is that you never quite know maybe where your next job is coming from, unless you are fortunate to go on a tour for months and months and months and that kind of thing. But even then, there is an end to it. So it's a very, it's a very inconsistent and unstable environment to be in. And a lot of people struggle with that, especially around COVID and especially since COVID. There's this expectation that everything's opened up again and that's great. And now we can get back into it. But actually, that's left a lot of anxiety for people as well, because there is that inconsistency in work. And it's, what if that happens to me again? I don't want what happened in COVID to happen again where I didn't have any work. So then people maybe look at alternative things that aren't satisfying them in the same way and aren't fulfilling them. So again, it's a reality, isn't it? And it's working with people who may come to you and go, oh, I've got this audition and I really want it because I haven't had any work for 6 months and I desperately need this. And maybe they've been teaching, and there's also a stigma around that kind of thing as well, taking several different jobs. And actually, if you're making a living out of music, no matter what it is that you're doing, you are awesome and you've been majorly successful. And I think that's something really important to remember as well. But yeah, they may come and go, I've got this audition, I really need this. And then they might come the next week and go, I didn't get it. And just the anxiety that they feel. And, obviously you're not therapists and well, some of you might be, but I think within that space, if people are coming to you and going, I'm finding this really difficult, it is just listening to them, isn't it? And going, I know, I'm really sorry that that's happening, but something may come along and it'll be when you least expect it. And all those things that people say, but actually there is a reality to it just being really difficult. And that's okay that people vent that and say, yeah, this is rubbish. And I'm finding this really unfair. And nobody told me that it would be like this. Or maybe they did and I just didn't get it. And again, all those things I wish I'd been told and discussed with people when I was starting out. Even now, people be like, I haven't had any work for ages and I've had to take on this work that I'm not really that bothered about. And it's true, it is so inconsistent and unstable. So that is a really big one as well. There are so many things that people come to me with, and those are probably the major things really, but there are so many. I could talk for hours about the issues that people bring into an income. Yeah.
When it comes to rejection, then, for the many entertainers out there, whether you're a theatre performer trying to get signed by an agent and that's taking a bit of time, or maybe you've gone for that 11th audition and nothing's coming up for you, and then you're worrying about the relationship with the agent, or maybe you're starting out in the music industry wanting to get signed, but that's not happening, or maybe you have got signed, but then you have the news that you're being dropped. There's so much there to manage. So, what would be your biggest tip to those performers? You've mentioned about, talking about it and accepting that it is really hard and that it's a bit rubbish at times, and that's okay. But what would be that bit of advice that you might share with us singing teachers?
As I've said, there is that reality that things are going to be tough. It's all right to vent that. We all find it tough sometimes. There is a way of thinking of, this is what I should be doing, and this is the way that I need to be doing it because this is what my hero did, or this is what my tutor at college did, or this is the person I really admire did this. So I need to do it like this as well. And I think that's something I see a lot. I think especially, and not sort of naming any names, especially in sort of music establishments, educational establishments, certain universities and colleges and things, there is very much a, right, you do this and then you do this, and that is how you will do that. And that is what I did, and that worked for me. And there's possibly not exploration around different ways of doing things. And again, I think if someone's coming to you and going, I've tried this, I've done this audition, I just keep getting no's, just keep getting rejections, it's again not for you to go, oh, well, why don't you do this? But sort of posing possible alternatives to things, or just making them feel that it's okay that they try something different. Don't mean try a different career, but just doing it a slightly different way. If they keep going to auditions and not being successful, that could be down to so many things, and it's so difficult to not take it personally. But do they need to have a little bit of a break from whatever they're doing for even for a week? Where it's okay that I just sit and watch Netflix for a week, or sit and go and see friends, go for walks, just anything away from music. There's this kind of, yeah, way of thinking of, I should be doing this all the time. And if I'm not, then I'm not going to do well. And actually, for our own mental health, we need to take breaks and we need to see friends and have a real balance. And or you know this, when you're in music, you sacrifice a lot that maybe other people don't. So you might not be able to go to a friend's wedding because you've got a tour, or go to your best mate's birthday party because you've got a really important gig, and that's how you make your money. And maybe people don't quite understand that. But yeah, if you're going to audition after audition and you're not getting things, that is just going to feed into anxiety and, am I good enough? And why isn't this working for me? And all of those things, really getting into that negative mind space. Having a bit of a break can be a really good thing. Also, just looking at why they started in the first place. I think that's a really good question to ask people. When they feel that things aren't going well, why did you want to start singing in the first place? When did you first realize that that was something that you wanted to do? And they might go, oh, I used to sing in my bedroom. I used to sing along to Shania Twain or Taylor Swift or something in my bedroom, and I loved it. And then people would tell me how great I was. And then I started going for auditions, or I started recording videos and putting them on YouTube, whatever it is that they're doing. There was a love there. There was something that made them want to do that. They might not have even thought they were going to make a career out of it. They just thought that was something that I really love. So I think people going to that space within themselves where they are connecting with, I really love this. And we're going to take all of the other stuff out of it. We're going to take the auditions, the teaching, whatever it is that they're doing out of this. And I'm just going to sing now. And I'm not going to worry about where this is going to go, the next audition, whatever it is. I'm just going to connect, because you always have that. It's almost like magic. You always have that in you. Obviously, unless you have some kind of vocal issue, which can also be worked through, you should always be able to sing something. So there is always that coming back. Once you take everything away, you are usually left with something that you really love. And if you no longer love it, that is definitely something to talk to somebody about, whether that be a therapist or a friend or family member. Why are you doing it if you're not enjoying it? And there's a part of you that does not love this anymore. That's obviously a lot to go through with a student who's come to you and said, no, I haven't got this audition. What would I do? What do I need to do? But I think, yeah, bring it really back to basics, just within that moment of, so what is it you love about singing? And they might go, I don't love it anymore. I hate it because every time I get an audition, I feel anxious and worried and my voice doesn't work. That is definitely a time to take a bit of a break. And then they might go, but if I take a break, then I can't do this and I can't carry on. And I'm just on the cusp of this thing. But actually, their mental health is so important. And of course, it's completely up to them what they do with that. I think just getting back to basics, it's really, really difficult. And things do come in. If you're constantly auditioning for things and you're not getting it, that is really tough. You have to explain to your family, your friends, your partner that you didn't get it again. There's just so much stigma around that. I've had people say to me things like, well, why don't you just not do it anymore then? And you can't do that because they may not understand if they're not in music or the arts, they might not understand why you keep doing it. And that can be really difficult to not have that understanding and empathy from people. To them, you could just stop and do something else and get a job in an office. That makes complete sense. If something's upsetting you and making you feel really bad about yourself, why would you keep doing it? But actually, a lot of musicians don't feel they have a choice in that. If you told a singer just to stop if it's upsetting them, that is not going to help. So taking a short break doesn't have to be a long break, but taking a break where they feel they can connect with friends, connect with themselves, maybe go for walks, do a couple of things that they want to do away from music, and then come back to it. Maybe they can then assess, actually, do I need to go for that other audition? Or is there something else that I can do here? Can I start my own band or start my own thing? Can I write my own musical? Whatever it is, there's just something, isn't there, about why you love music, and everyone will have their own individual take on that. It'll be different for everybody, which is a really beautiful thing.
Yeah. I feel like this also alludes to the preparation that we spoke about earlier. And I was watching a recent documentary on the BBC called Boy Bands Forever. And in that, you hear part of the construction of these 90s bands, like Take That, E17, and Five, and how there was this certain look that the management was after and this female appeal that they were trying to satisfy. And for artists who are just starting out and emerging onto the music scene, how can they manage this commercial pressure, the things that they think are required of them on who they're trying to be pushed into being? And how can they make sure then that they stay true to themselves, to their own vocal identity, their own physical identity, so that they don't detach themselves from the very reason they started and loved singing in the first place?
This varies depending on what their situation is. The documentary that you've just talked about was very much around being signed to labels, then being pushed into the public eye and having fame, upon you right away and having to navigate all of that. And of course, that is something that a lot of people do experience. I think from what I've experienced in talking to people who are starting out in the industry, no matter what their age is, but people who are just getting into it, that there is a little bit more awareness of being independent, staying true to yourself, staying true to your roots, your music, why you started doing it in the first place. There is a little bit more of a cachet around being independent, which again wasn't the thing when I was starting out. It was very much you want to get signed to Universal and then that's it, and then that'll be your life. But actually now, and maybe social media, the internet, there's some real positives in that. You can put your stuff out there whenever you want, get immediate feedback, and you can stay independent. You can make some money out of your music if you are good at social media and all of those things. So there's some real positive things around that. In terms of expectations and staying true to that and not having those pressures, that's going to be really difficult. And I think there's something that I am very much an advocate for, which is that if you are signing with a label or a management company or whatever it is, that in the contract there needs to be something about mental health. So, regular breaks. Every few months, we're going to give you a week off, even. We have access to therapists, or we have a number for somebody that you can ring, that kind of thing, just so that people know that there is support there if they need it. Otherwise, you're starting out, and if you do feel down or upset that things aren't going the way that you thought they would, or the way you were told they would by your label or management or whoever it is, you're going to feel so bad. You're going to feel like you've let everybody down and that you aren't worthy, and maybe everyone's made a mistake and all of those things. But of course, as we've said, it's okay that things don't work out the way that you thought they would. It's okay that sometimes there's a bit of rejection, or maybe you didn't get chosen to play on that particular radio show or TV show, whatever it is, but there will be something else that comes up. But there is so much difficulty with navigating all of that. And I think some of that, again, if you're starting out, it does come down to who's around you. And I think if parents aren't educated on some of the pitfalls of the industry, they're not going to know how to support their, family member who's maybe going into the industry. So there is a lot, isn't there, around educating people. We see this glamorous side of the industry from social media, from TV shows, from reality TV shows. If you watch The X Factor or whatever, reality TV show there is, there's this huge, kind of rose-tinted view on it all, isn't it? It's like, once you get this, you're on TV, and then Simon Cowell or whoever it is will sign you to this thing, and then you'll be number one, and all of these massive things that come with that, but they don't see all of the negative, gloomy side to that. And, a lot of people, as we've mentioned, or I've mentioned, a lot of the general public who maybe don't have an idea of what it's like to be in the arts, that's what they will see. And I think there is a reality. And I'm not saying, of course the music industry is a really exciting place to be, but there are realities to that. If you've got somebody starting out and maybe they do want to work on the West End in a show, and that's all they've ever wanted to do, and that's all they've ever been training to do, again, do they know that actually they may not get every audition that they go for, and that's okay? They probably do. People have probably talked to them about that and said, I went through that and that was difficult. But do they really know? And do they also have an alternative to that? I think that is something really important to talk to people who are starting out. What is it that you're wanting? Asking them to maybe assess that. You could even write it down. What is it that you want from this? And how do you think you want to get there? And actually, is there an alternative? If that doesn't work out quite the way you think, is there an alternative to that you would be happy with? And they might go, actually, no, this is all I've ever wanted to do. And that's their expectation. That's something that they want. And that's, that's their thing. And they may discover all these things as they go along. But do you think that people are getting a little bit more aware and savvy of staying true to themselves? And probably because there are these documentaries, people are talking about things a little bit more. So there is definitely something really good going on with that.
Hey you! If you're enjoying the Singing Teachers Talk podcast, then don't forget to hit the subscribe button. We are committed to bringing you engaging conversations and valuable insights from experts across the field of voice. By subscribing, it means we can continue to do that. You'll never miss an episode, and you'll be helping to spread the word to other singing teachers, vocal coaches, and overall voice nerds. So subscribe to this channel now and just watch your teaching grow. You mentioned about having a clause in the contract when you sign with the label. Yeah. And I'm just thinking about Robbie Williams has recently said that fame is a mental illness in itself. And he's talking probably about his career in general and being in the public eye. But if we think about him in the Take That years, when he was 16, going into this boy band that were catapulted pretty much into fame, we're still having this same conversation about 20, 30 years later with the One Direction boys and the tragic incident with Liam Payne and his death.
Yeah.
So what are we not answering here? What conversations do we actually need to be having with the network around these people who are there wanting to sing, wanting to entertain? And it's not their choice necessarily to be this famous.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, like you say, there are massive parallels 30 years on. There are maybe certain lessons that have been learned from certain cases, certain people, certain artists, but actually underlying that, there is still people who want to make a lot of money and exploit. And even though a lot of people are becoming more aware, are talking more, are wanting to support their artists more in record labels, that is happening a little bit more. There is still, again, that reality of people wanting to make money out of you. And again, I've heard, I think maybe in that documentary, actually, possibly Simon Cowell, somebody said something like, if you don't want this, go and work in Tesco. You know what you sign up for. You know what you're letting yourself in for when you get into a boy band. And actually, I just don't think that's good enough. Is that like you are completely giving that responsibility to them and going, well, you know what you did. I'm completely responsibility free here. And that's down to you. Actually, no, they have a duty of care. And that is something that has been massively lacking and something that I'm working on with my PhD, which I mentioned earlier, a code of practice. There's no code of practice when it comes to mental health in music. There's nothing to say you need to have this person here when you sign a contract, or this venue needs to supply a quiet room. There's none of that. And we all know these things happen. And with Robbie Williams, we are talking, a few decades ago. But yeah, he was 16. And then what, 18 when he signed his solo career, something like that, when he signed his like multi-million, solo thing. And there was like pictures of him and interviews with him, and he's like opening champagne and stuff. There's just, where was the duty of care for him? There was this massive, mentality of, well, he's really lucky. And there's so many boys, so many people, millions of people that would want to be in his position. If he is complaining, we don't want to hear it. And that's always been the way. Robbie Williams has always been really open about his mental health and his struggles. And he's absolutely brilliant like that. But there is still people that are like, oh, we don't want to hear it. You're a multi-million pound, musician.
I think that's the problem. It's that we are measuring somebody's worthiness of complaining against the amount of money they have in their bank account. And mental health knows no figure. It's going to get you whether you've got a pound or minus in the bank, or whether you've got a bazillion pounds in the bank. And I think, as you say, he was 16 when he first entered Take That. And then Liam Payne and the One Direction folk, they were also in their teens. And then Justin Bieber, he's in his teens. What can we do to make sure that these people feel prepared, held, guided, so that we don't get multiple Robbie Williams experiences or Liam Payne experiences? We've got to look after our musicians, because they are the people we turn to help us feel understood through their words, through their music. And so it does not matter how big their check is. Mental health knows no bounds.
Yeah. And I think Guy Chambers came out recently, didn't he, and said, I don't think that under 18s should be allowed in the music industry, something like that. And I get where he's coming from, because obviously he worked massively with Robbie Williams quite prolifically throughout his career. I'm not sure how much I agree with that, but yeah, that's what we need to do. We need to have people sit down with artists, anyone who's starting, and it doesn't have to be artists who are signing with a label, anyone who's entering into the music industry. There should be training. I provide training to people, but it's not something that's pushed by colleges, universities, record labels, management. They don't go, right, before you sign this contract, we just want you to do this day certificate in mental health awareness in the music industry, so you know some of the things that might come up. No one does that. You learn it as you go along. But people are more aware now, so they are talking about it more, so they know these things are happening. So sitting down with people, if someone had sat down, and obviously this is, again, a reality TV show situation, so it's a little bit different. But I know there are things coming into place around reality TV because of Caroline Flack and other people, where they're like, right, here's access to a therapist, here's this. But no one sat down with One Direction and said, right, here's some numbers you can ring. Here's a 24-hour helpline. So if you're on tour and you need to speak to somebody, you can ring them and talk about whatever you need to talk about. They are trained in mental health and music, and they know, they know the industry. You give them a call if you're struggling. Or here's a Zoom thing for therapists and you can get on and talk to them. Or here's some ways that you can learn about resilience and manage this. And if there is a particularly difficult thing, then this is what you would do, and this is what we would recommend. Or this is how you abstain from drinking and taking drugs. And, this is what we would have recommended to you. That's what they needed. And that's what people still need. They need that awareness of this is a really difficult industry and we all know it. And sometimes people talk about it, but it's only when something really tragic happens. Music charities talk about it a lot, but I've spoken to a lot of people recently and done a lot of research. And I'd say, statistically, 1 out of 10 people have heard of some of these services. And it's amazing they exist, but why don't people know about them? Why isn't the number for help musicians or music support on the wall of a green room in a venue or on the wall of a recording studio? Or why don't people know about this? If you're a member of the Musicians Union, you get an email once every quarter, whatever it is, saying here's some of services. But if you're not a member of the Musicians Union, you're not going to know about any of those. And even if you do get that email, a lot of people don't look at it. So we just need to promote these things a lot better and make it almost, a code of practice. We need to implement these things and make it a non-negotiable. You are starting out in the industry. Here is this. You get this course and you get access to these people. And if you're feeling upset or down, that's okay. Of course, you're going to feel like that because you've just been thrown into this massive thing. And obviously, I don't know about the support that Liam Payne had around him. He may have had a lot of support. He might have had a regular therapist that he talked to. It sounds like he had really supportive family, friends around him, but he still went down the avenue that he went down in terms of addiction. So again, did he have a pre-existing mental health problem before he entered into the industry? And I'm not saying people need to be vetted or have some kind of evaluation before they enter into music. No, but if you are prone to things like that, or you are, again, even more so, there needs to be that duty of care. If there's a potential risk of you becoming an alcoholic when you enter into the music industry, you really need to be thinking about the venues you're playing and what's happening with that. You can't avoid playing gigs, but maybe the people around you can be a little bit more aware of what you need and what you don't need and what they can do to help. I think there's, again, everyone needs to talk about it. Everyone needs to share that experience. Well, I did this when I was feeling like that. Oh, I did that, and that really helped me. We just don't talk about this in the way because there is a stigma and there is well, they're lucky to be there. So actually, I don't want to hear it. They know exactly what they're signing up for. And if the people who are running the labels are thinking like that, what chance does everybody else have? And that really scares me that somebody of that position and that level of success has that mentality of, well, if you don't want it, then don't do it because someone else will do it. And actually, you're probably better off working in Tesco. That's not an excuse for poor management and failing people whilst working with them and their mental health, especially vulnerable people. And younger people tend to be vulnerable because maybe they don't have those experiences. So there's just so much within that. And again, I could talk about this for hours. It's just, it's not good enough.
Just to come at it from the other side, we don't know if there have been some of these conversations happening behind closed doors in private meetings. Perhaps certain celebrity figures are getting these talks with management about phone numbers and therapists. But equally, It is a very unusual situation for somebody to be put in a life where they can't even walk down to the supermarket without being bombarded and, revered and loved. And how do you
Yeah.
help people with coping with that, but staying grounded as well?
It depends on the kind of person you are to begin with as well. I think some people are extremely grounded, and as I was saying before, a lot of people entering into music now are so much more savvy and aware of things than I was. So there is that awareness of I'm going to stay rooted, I'm going to stay grounded. That is really difficult, though. No matter who you are, to have people recognize you in the street and invade your personal space. And I think, it's one thing to have that after a gig, a meet and greet where it's your work and you're expecting it. But to be out and about shopping and people are taking photos of you or coming over to you, it is really, really difficult. And actually, a lot of people do manage that really well. I've had clients come to me who are really successful, who have really tried to be kind and accepting of fans doing that kind of thing to a point. But then when it gets to a point, it's okay, I've done this enough now. And if, especially women, if a woman does that, they are called all sorts of things. Cold, things that I can't really say because it's not very nice. Um, it just seems a little bit different for women. There's almost an expectation that women are going to be like really warm and kind and accepting. Of course they are. If you're invading the space, anyone's going to be annoyed.
Chapel Roan has just come out with something about this, about boundaries. And she said, I feel more love than I ever have in my life. And I feel the most unsafe I have ever felt in my life. And basically, when I'm on stage, when I'm performing, I'm at work. And when I'm walking down the street, I am not. And
Yeah.
how creepy is it as somebody coming up to you and and invading your space and you have no idea who they are, but because you know who she is, there's this weird
Mhm.
automatic
Yeah.
property that you think that you have on them.
Yes. Yeah. And that's it, isn't it? She's really hit the nail on the head there that actually when you're at work, you're expected to perform, maybe say hi to some fans afterwards. You're not expected to be groped or hugged or any of those things. I know, again, a lot of female performers are kissed and hugged and things like that. And, it's just not great at all, just not acceptable. And there maybe isn't that protection in that way. But the groundedness and managing that and putting those boundaries in, again, it's really difficult. And these things should be talked about. Again, as we were just talking about, if you're entering into the music industry, talk about that with your artist. Talk about how, well, this is what you do if you see someone in the street. The issue with that is that sometimes in the past, and I know of this from personal experience, certain management companies and people may want you to engage with fans in public and want you to not be rude and just do whatever it takes because it obviously doesn't look great if you're going, no, no, can't sign that now. So it just depends again on who's around you. And I think when you sort of ask that question about sort of how do you keep people grounded, what do you say to people to sort of, I guess, help them put those boundaries in, it really does depend on who you've got around you. So putting those boundaries in when you're going out shopping or having a meal with your family or something and someone comes over, of course you're going to be polite again to an extent. But actually that is your personal space. And it comes down to something I mentioned a little while ago. Again, that systemic way that we feel about the music industry, we feel about our musicians, actors, anyone in the arts who have reached a certain level of success, they are not thought of in the same way as you would think of your gran or your sister. They suddenly become this person that we have to go over to and this massive icon that we worship. And that is how society deals with fame. That again, that's going to take years and years to unpick and change, but no one really wants to change it. If you think of the handful of famous people compared to the millions of people that aren't famous, why would we change that? It only benefits the famous people. and actually they're famous and they make loads of money, and who cares how they think and feel? But actually, of course, they're people and they're working, and actually they've got families and friends and people that they want to see, and they live in the world with us.
Mm.
So, there's just so much, isn't there, about those people who are entering into music, that groundedness. That is something they may already have going into the industry, and that may be, dependent on how they were brought up, what they learn growing up around, respecting people and respecting themselves and their self-worth and all that kind of thing. But of course, you get a lot of validation from, like she said, you get a lot of validation from people loving you and loving your music. And of course, you want that. I think, again, going back to what Simon Cowell said, he's saying you can't have it both ways, isn't he? He's saying you can't have, fame and be in a band or whatever it is, and then go, but actually, I don't want to have fame. I don't want to be approached on the street. I just want to. He's sort of saying, you can't have it both ways. But I think you could do to an extent.
Yeah, we need to get to a point where that is a possibility. And it does make me think about that. We're talking about the network around artists, and to a degree, that is us as the listener. And I have a little bit of a fun question about who have been your celebrity crushes over the years? Because I've got many boyfriends that I keep to for myself that live out in the world that I've never met, and they don't know that we're in a relationship, which is a parasocial relationship. And I'm just being comically creepy here. I'm not actually trying to be a creep.
Gosh, who have I had crushes on? My daughter often asks me this. Keanu Reeves. Musically, Eddie Vedder. Love Eddie Vedder. Absolutely love Eddie Vedder. Yeah, mostly actors for me. But yeah, I know what you mean. You sort of have fantasies, don't you, about it and what it'd be like if we were together, and would I be able to handle this, that, and the other? And actually, yeah, they have no idea that I
I have
exist.
no idea. Psychologists have said that these parasocial relationships, which can be defined as a one-sided connection with a media figure or a fictional character, where the other person is unaware of such a connection, that these can have a positive effect on our mental well-being and maybe stop us from feeling lonely. But it just gets tested when it oversteps a boundary. So, as the person on the other side who is kind of creating this buzz around a particular band or a person. Like I remember on the documentary, people were fasting or starving themselves until Take That got back together again, or, standing outside their house. And how can we actually cope with our own parasocial relationships and make sure that we don't get so affected by these people that are not part of our actual lives?
Oh. Wow. I mean, that at that point, it's kind of crossing over into sort of almost religious territory, isn't it? I'm starving myself until Take That, get back together. That there's something, yeah, going on there, isn't there? Where they actually do they believe that their actions will help Take That get back together in some way, or are they doing it, as sort of solidarity? There's just something really interesting in that. Um, yeah, I think if you're in that kind of headspace where you are taking things to a next level of, these people mean so much to me, it's affecting my life, that actually they're not together, or this person doesn't know who I am, or whatever it is that's going on there. I think there is definitely something, isn't there, about looking at what's happening in your life and who you do have around you. I can only imagine that if you are putting everything on to people that you don't know in that way, there is maybe something in your life that you are not getting in terms of having your needs met. And maybe you need more social interaction. Maybe you need more people in your life that you feel valued by. Maybe you need people in your life that you feel loved by. There's just something massive in that, which is a really important thing for you to look at, that you deserve to have relationships with people who know that you are existing. And it's a really, when there's music involved as well, it's really a really personal thing. You can genuinely feel that your favorite artist has written a song for you. It speaks to you. They know exactly what's going on in your life. It helps you through a difficult time. This is why people say these things. I've had people, and I know people who have had fans go up to them and go, "God, that your lyrics changed my life and they got me through a really difficult time, and I just want to thank you." That's a really beautiful thing. It's a really gorgeous thing. But if it's going into sort of fantasy territory, I think there is definitely something there. And I think it's a very common thing. Like you say, it's probably sort of healthy, isn't it, to sort of fantasize about people and think, God, what it would be like if I was on that tour with them, or if I was in that band and I was singing and all that kind of stuff. I think it's probably very healthy and something probably most people have done at some point. I think if you're sort of wanting relationships that maybe you're not going to get, again, I think it's just important to reflect on your own life and yeah, what you're getting from that
From
and
it,
what you're
yeah.
not getting from your actual friends and people in your life.
Mm. What would you say to the person who, and this again is quite common, I think, is fearful of failure, but is equally as fearful of success? What might somebody
Mm.
might call the Jonah complex?
Mm. Wow, yeah. I mean, again, it's assessing, isn't it, what you feel is failure and what you feel is success. And I think if you're fearful of those things, again, it's important to explore that and talk about that. Maybe you can write in a journal. It's something I sort of often recommend to clients and things, and that I've done. If you've got feelings about things and there's any kind of fears, writing down what it is that you're fearful of. And if there is any way to change that or manage that, sometimes there's no way of changing things. You've just got to kind of roll with it. But actually, being fearful of failure, again, is a very common thing and it holds a lot of people back. And I'm sure we have all experienced this at some point. We might have to get up and do a speech at a wedding or a speech at work or a presentation or anything. And you might think, gosh, I really don't want to fail at this. What if everyone's looking at me and they're laughing or they think that I'm no good? We all have that sometimes. The fear of success, I think, is so much less um not less common. I just don't think people are aware of it as much. And I think it can be a really debilitating thing as well, because again, that can massively hold you back. The fear of failure keeps you really safe. If you are really anxious about doing something, you might not do it because you just don't want to fail. There's also, something about quite a common thing of sort of meeting people that you don't know, going into a room of people. And my friends invited me here, and I'm the only one that doesn't know everybody, or whatever it is. You kind of walk into that room full of people, and are they going to like me, and all of those things. And you might go, actually, I don't think I'm going to go. I'm just going to stay at home. You're keeping yourself safe and protected in that. But equally, if there's an opportunity and you're not going for it because there's something there, you may feel that that's fear of failure, but actually you might get that thing that you want. You might do really well in it. Someone might say, "Oh, we really want you to come and work for us." And you might think, "Oh gosh, but if I go and work for them, then they're going to expect this thing from me, and I don't think I'm very good." And the imposter syndrome starts to come in. And actually, again, just looking at that can be a really, really important thing. What would success be? What's your idea of success? And what would it be like to be successful? Is there a fear there? Is there a fear that if you're successful, you won't be able to maintain it or something will happen to ruin it? What's your experience of that? People might not have an experience of success where anything was ruined for them. Things might be really good for them in some ways. So where does that come from? So there's something, isn't there, about what's your experience of failure? What's your experience of success? And why? Why do you feel fearful of those things?
Mm.
After looking at those things, they might sort of actually, yeah, I'm not really that bothered about the success. Maybe I just don't want it. Maybe I genuinely don't care if I get that job, or maybe things will change and I don't want things to change at the moment. So
Mm.
again, it's all about keeping yourself safe usually with both of those things. But yeah, within music, It's such a common thing, isn't it, for people to be worried about judgment. I see it a lot in the classical world. A lot of people worried about their playing not being as good and an audience watching them. And of course, if you make a mistake on your violin and there's silence,
Mm,
everybody can see that. So there's something, isn't there, about, I'm fearful of failure. But then again, you might get first violin, and then all of a sudden it's the fear of the success. Because what if you can't keep that up? What if all the other violinists are looking at you and going, why did they get made first? And it's the same with anything like that, a part in a musical or, yeah, a record deal or some session work. You might be working with somebody you've really admired for ages and that's a success to you. But what if it doesn't go well? And I think, again, just navigating that is really difficult. And looking at all the things we've talked about, why is it that you want to do this? And it is that success to you. And if it is, what if it doesn't work out? You've tried it and it might happen again or it might not. But that's the thing that you wanted to do this for. So maybe it's important for you that you do that and you just see how it goes. And afterwards, everything will still be fine. You'll still have your friends and your family and all the things that you need and want in your life. It'll just be that. And that's what you need to navigate. There's a habit of kind of catastrophizing, isn't there? We all do it. But there is but if I don't do that or I do that and it goes really well, then that'll mean that happens. But actually, we are really telling ourselves stories, and actually, often the story is worse than the
mm,
reality,
yeah,
especially in anxious times.
yeah, I hear that. Can you tell us about counselling for musicians and the services that you offer?
Yeah. So, yeah, as I was saying before, I started counselling for musicians in sort of 2016 when I was looking at provisions for the music industry and mental health, and there wasn't what there is now. There was very few services. I work with musicians, anyone in the music industry. It's a counselling service. So, yeah, people will come to me and talk about anything that they need to. I also provide training. So I provide the first and only, up to this point, certificate in mental health awareness in the music industry, which I've delivered to lots and lots of people over the years. And it's just so interesting. Every time I do that course and deliver that course, the amount of contribution and feedback I get from the participants absolutely amazes me. People have such amazing, wonderful insights and things I wouldn't have even thought of that I end up writing down a big list of things at the end of it. And I've been doing it for years. Things that I haven't thought of, experiences that people tell me about that I think, gosh, I believe that somebody actually went through that. And the amount that people get out of that is really great. So yeah, I do a lot of training and I also run the Centre for Mental Health in the music industry in Stockport in Manchester. So yeah, we do a lot of training there and we hold sort of conferences and workshops and just talking peer groups, where people can come talk about their experiences, talk about some of the things that they want changing in the industry, if that can happen. And again, it takes everybody to want to change things. And some people don't want things to change, but a lot of people do. And I feel like those conversations are happening more and more. So I'm doing that. And as I said before, I'm working on the PhD, working on a code of practice. I've got people who have already signed up for that. Some really great, lovely, wonderful people in the music industry who really want to see that change happen. But I do understand that's going to take some work to implement and possibly even, government engagement and things like that. So these are things that I'm still working on. But yeah, I do a lot of work with the music industry and just raising awareness, talking a lot, yeah, pushing things. I really wanted to push the education thing because, again, as I've said throughout this, people aren't prepared.
Yeah.
It just astounds me that music business is taught in some universities and colleges, but there's not one section, even a few lessons, even one lesson about mental health and how you manage some of the pitfalls in music. And I'm often asked to go into universities and do a workshop and things, but a handful of people will show up. So why isn't this part of the curriculum? Why
Mm,
aren't we teaching this as a non-negotiable, mandatory thing so that people who are doing music business or anyone doing music goes away and goes, okay, I never knew that. It's made me think now. I'm gonna, gonna be able to signpost some of the artists I'm working with, or whatever it is I'm doing, or yeah, some of the producers that I'm writing with. Or I was working with somebody yesterday, and they felt really depressed, and I could have just given them this number. Those things should be happening. So
mm,
that's something that I massively advocate and massively campaign for, and just will continue to do that. So that's
mm.
what counselling for musicians is.
Brilliant. And where can our listeners find out more about it and get in touch with you?
So I have several websites, Alexa. It's yeah, counsellingformusicians.co.uk. Then there's the Centre for Mental Health in the Music Industry.com, I believe. And if they want to email me, they can email me at rjepsontherapy@gmail.com. Google me and things will come up. But yeah, I'd love to hear from anybody who wants to talk about anything, really.
Rachel, thank you so much for keeping us company today. And thank you for what you're advocating for. And hopefully, together through this conversation, I know there's so much more to chat about too. We can start to just come together and be the network for these musicians going into such a fickle industry, but which can also be glorious. So, thank you very much for your
Yes.
time.
Thank you. Thanks, Alex. And thanks for asking me. And I think it's also worth just mentioning very quickly that, creating music is massively wonderful for mental health. So, there are real pros to being in music. It's just some of those pitfalls and some of the way that things are approached and managed that we want to shift. So, yeah, making music is a beautiful, wonderful thing and can really help people. But yeah, thank you so much for having me on. And yeah, I could talk about these things for hours and hours. So, yeah, absolutely. It's wonderful that you're doing this and that people can hear this. And again, raising awareness. We just need to talk about it. We all just need to carry on talking about it.
Rachel, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Alexa.